For materials, one of the most important materials that you are going to be using for this first portion, this is a hot plate. Obviously it is not on because, well, my hands are on it and they're not hot. I don't want to put my hands on this one. I already started this demonstration because it does take a little bit to dissolve our copper sulfate. We have distilled water in our lovely jugs, which we will be putting into these 250 milliliter beakers. Over here, we have a scale that is to 2 decimal places, very precise in massing out our copper sulfate. Those being our primary supplies, let's get to the calculations. So if we look at our lab sheet, you'll see highlighted, unfortunately in black and white, that we are looking at 0.43 grams per milliliter of copper sulfate. What that means is per every 1 milliliter of water, we are adding 0.43, not 1.43, grams of copper sulfate to the mixture. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take my 250 milliliter beaker and I'm going to fill it with distilled water. The reason we use distilled water and not tap water is because tap water contains a lot of different minerals that can interfere in our crystallization process. Now, what the quantity of water that I have just added is approximately 200 milliliters. I'm going to turn the heat up to about 75 degrees Celsius, not Fahrenheit. If we do the calculations of for every 1 milliliter of water, we have 200 milliliters of water. If for every one of those, we add 0.43 grams of copper sulfate, we will calculate out to 90 grams of copper sulfate. Now I have this cup that I'm going to mass it into. On this scale, if you can see, we will have 0 marked when nothing is on there, and adding this to it, it will show a mass of about 4.5 grams. We don't want that. You are going to hit 0 on the scale, and now it says 0. It is taken off the mass of this cup. You're going to take a high-tech plastic spoon, and we are going to mass out our 90 grams of copper sulfate. And if some gets on the table, it is not the end of the world. You just have to clean up after yourself. If you put in a little too much, like I have done, you'll take out some and put it back in the bag. And to get your 90 exactly, you'll have to do something like this to get yourself to 90 grams. You're going to add our 90 grams of copper sulfate to this. Unfortunately, we do not have enough of these magnetic stir rods for everybody to have their own. So we are going to go, once again, the extremely high-tech route, and we're going to have to stir until dissolved, which you can already see because this is actually an ionic compound. It is already dissolving. But this is the one where we are going to use for the next portion, which is pouring our solution to get our copper sulfate crystals to begin forming. We have these large Petri dishes, which I'll be taking one. Large Petri dish. This is what we will grow our seed crystals in. The reason we're growing seed crystals before we try and grow really large ones is because we want to make sure that we're growing a single crystal and not a cluster of crystals. The purpose of this high-tech device is to preheat the water so that it takes less time. I'm going to take only a little bit of this because it's not quite fully dissolved, but just for the sake of the demonstration, I'm going to take this and make sure you're pouring into the bottom, pour your copper sulfate solution. Now for my part, I'm going to let this continue to heat and dissolve, but you are going to cover the inner surface. You're then going to cover your plate, and the plate is where your crystals are going to form. So I do have a few Petri dishes I have made before now, and if we come over here and look, I've got two here that are going to show what these seed crystals are going to look like. And this is going to be your starting point. So we have these large, beautiful blue crystals, ultramarine blue diamond-shaped crystals. What we don't want is what I've done over here. And I'm going to remelt the solution I have around the table, so those of you who are videotaping can come on around here. And in here, we'll see I have a whole bunch of little tiny crystals. So the reason that this happened is that I placed it onto these cold countertops, and the solution cooled very, very quickly. And thus the crystals are forming extremely quickly, resulting in a bunch of relatively small crystals as opposed to those ones I placed on the blanket. And they cooled very slowly, and so they formed nice large seed crystals for us to use. So this is going to be the first portion of our experiment, making these seed crystals. That way we have a nice clean single crystal that we're starting from, so that we're able to grow these large single crystals that we want to grow.